I now yield 5 minutes to the gentlewoman from Washington, Ms. Jayapal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Young, it is great to see you and to call you director. Congratulations again on your appointment. And I wanted to say, first of all, that there are many things in this budget that we appreciate, including the taxes on the wealthiest. As you know, I'm a lead sponsor of the Ultra Millionaire Tax Act. We also appreciate the restrictions on stock buybacks, as well as some of the immigration provisions that you mentioned earlier, the investment in judges, the legal counsel, and community-based alternatives to detention. We appreciate all of those things, so thank you for those. Switching gears, America has a monopoly crisis that's strangling small businesses and hurting people's pocketbooks, while corporations have made immense profits through pandemic profiteering and price gouging. And I was very pleased to see the historic increases to the antitrust division and to FTC to robustly enforce our antitrust laws. But that's just one piece. As you know, we have very bipartisan efforts here in Congress to give federal agencies more tools to ensure competition. Director Young, do you agree that those efforts should be prioritized?
We do, and that's why we talked earlier, increasing competition is one way. We have to deal with inflation in this country, and why you see a $273 million request for the Antitrust Division and Department of Justice, $88 million increase, 48% over 2021, and a $498 million request, or a 40% increase over 2021 for the FTC.
Thank you. And I also appreciate the Department of Justice's recent letter stating the department's views that the, quote, rise of dominant platforms presents a threat to open markets and competition. And we're looking forward to moving our package along. Now, you won't be surprised to know that I need to express my deep concern with the 4% increase in defense spending. This is on top of the unprecedented increase over the president's fiscal 22 request that just became law. Director Young, can you tell me how much the Pentagon has given to just 5 contractors?
Are we just picking contractors? I'm sure I can, get back to you, Congresswoman, on the top contractors I assume you're interested in.
Let me tell you that up to 1/3 of Pentagon contracts after 9/11 went to just 5 contractors. And from fiscal year 2001 to 2020, these companies received $2.1 trillion in 2021 dollars. And in fiscal year 2020 alone, the Pentagon gave $75 billion in contracts to Lockheed Martin, which totals more than 1.5 times the entire budgets of the State Department and USAID. Director Young, is the Pentagon the only federal agency that has never passed an audit?
I believe that's correct.
So, and it's actually failed its last 4 audits, and yet we are continuing to pile money on top. And I would just say that to Representative Moulton's questions, I would argue that there are more efficient ways to spend the money we have. It doesn't mean that we can't have solid and secure national security if we actually cut out waste, fraud, and abuse and focus on the technologies that are going to provide us with the biggest bang for the buck. And yet, it seems that our only strategy on military spending is bigger is better. Do you think that bigger is better forever and ever, Director Young?
I think a defense budget has to be strategy-based. Congresswoman, you have been a long time advocate here on getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse in the Department of Defense. That is accurate. But we've also heard from the other side of the aisle who believe our number isn't large enough. That is why we believe the right thing to do here is use the long-term defense strategy to build our budget.
Director Young, what, I assume that the other side also would agree that we don't want waste, fraud, and abuse in our Pentagon budget. And I remember last year or last term under a Republican president, we actually had a Republican budget director come and testify that the Pentagon should pass an audit. What work is going on to make sure that the Pentagon passes a budget before we continue to increase military spending indiscriminately just to thump the patriotic banner and say that somehow because we're increasing military spending, even though we can't pay for our veterans here at home, even though we can't invest in education in the ways that we want, even though we're having debates around whether or not we have enough money for childcare, something the president has advocated for, by the way, more childcare. But as we have those debates, how are we going to make sure that the taxpayer dollars that we are spending are actually going to an audited agency that has cut out waste, fraud, and abuse?
There's no reasonable person who would disagree that the Pentagon should be able to pass a basic audit. But I do want to reiterate, we think the need here is to put forward a budget that is tied to a national strategy. Whether or not you agree with the strategy is another thing, but as you've heard, there are a lot of opinions on what the defense number should be.
Director Young, you know how I've been advocating on this for a long time, and I just don't understand. There's nothing that is contradictory to a national defense strategy when we talk about making sure the Pentagon passes an audit and cuts out waste, fraud, and abuse before we heap more dollars on it. So thank you again for your tremendous service to our country and the role that you currently occupy and everything you've done before this. And I hope we can work together to actually make taxpayer dollars mean something instead of just profits
Gentlewoman's
to
time has
five
expired.
defense contractors. Thank